CHiPs is a television show that ran from 1977 to 1983, and it dealt with California Highway Patrol officers, or CHP officers, which is where the name CHiPs comes from. The two main characters in the show were John Baker, played by Larry Wilcox, and Frank Poncherello, or Ponch, played by Erik Estrada. And they were motorcycle officers. In addition to showing all the police work that was going on, it also showcased the West Coast way of life and things that were popular in California at the time. And at least for me, growing up on the East Coast and watching a lot of these episodes during winter, I really wanted to move out to California. And I've never quite shaken that. I still want to this day. I guess because winter never goes away. Now, this is a review that seems like it's way overdue because we've referenced CHiPs in several other reviews. And you watched the show quite a while ago. You even asked for a CHiPs birthday party one year. But what I found was your viewing slowed down during season 4 and you kind of had to push to get through the end of the series. And I think I understand that because I rewatched some of season 4 the other day, not having remembered it very well. And I think I know why that was. But at least initially, you liked the show, right?
Yes, I really liked CHiPs, especially the earlier seasons. Probably a part of that is because Cindy Cahill is in it, and I really liked her. And then they replaced her with Bonnie, which, it's nothing against Bonnie, but I liked Cindy more. I also really liked Ponch at the time, because he was goofy and clumsy. Then I started to like John a little bit more. Where I stand now is probably them both equally. I like them both equally. I also like Sergeant Cottrell. I really like him because he's sarcastic and serious and funny all at the same time.
Yeah, Robert Pine's a very good actor. He even plays Magnum's father in some flashback episodes, and his son actually plays Captain Kirk in the new movies. So there's a little bit of a connection for you. I really like the early seasons as well. You mentioned Cindy Cahill. Brianne Leary played the part. She's a very good actor. And that part was very well rounded, and she was a good character. When they brought Bonnie in, it's nothing against Randy Oakes or even the character of Bonnie, but they had changed the show over at that point. There was kind of a shift, and she was being promoted. She was kind of being promoted the way Farrah Fawcett was for Charlie's Angels. So I don't think they gave her a lot of good character stuff initially like they did Brianne Leary. And I think maybe Randy Oakes fought for that as the series went on, but the series changed a lot. Those early seasons, though, for me, they were a lot like another show that I loved that took place before this one, which was called Emergency, which was about two Los Angeles County paramedics, Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto. And they had a formula and a relationship and a partnership much like John and Ponch do in CHiPs, where one was kind of impetuous and goofy, the other one was a little bit more easygoing and settled. And that formula really works well. And so this one appealed to me too, at least in those first few seasons where, you know, they're on the road a lot, they're on the highways, they're on their bikes, they're doing high-speed chases, they're pulling people over and meeting people, and some of those are funny. And some of them are serious. They even pull over some movie stars sometimes because people kind of wanted to do little cameos and guest shots on the show because it was popular at the time. It was a very big show. And they were very big stars for a while, Larry Wilcox and Erik Estrada, when the show first came out.
Yeah, I really liked this show. I really like all of the characters. I feel like with Cindy and Bonnie, as far as that goes, I think that they should have just stuck with Cindy. Again, nothing against Bonnie. It's just I liked Cindy more. I even, for Halloween, I dressed up as a police officer, and you got me like a little badge that said S. Cahill, because I wanted to be Cindy Cahill and not Bonnie.
Right. You specifically wanted, that character really appealed to you. I'm not sure if it was a case of the actress wanting to leave the show or the show writing out, you know, the actors. They changed over cast. I mean, Grossi stayed on and Gutierrez as the supporting characters and Barixa, but Fritz left and Michael Dorn came in as Turner, and he would later play Worf in the Star Trek The Next Generation series. And Bonnie came in, of course, and then, you know, the show just had a very different feel to it after a while. Now, like I said, they would focus on things that were going on the West Coast because these guys in their personal life would be into whatever was popular at the time. So one week it might be roller skating, the next week it might be jet skis, they might be skydiving or hang gliding,
disco dancing,
all sorts of different things. And the show was as much about that as it was about police work. And so it showcased California in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of people maybe moved out there for that reason. And I know a lot of people went into law enforcement and wanted to be CHP motorcycle officers because of this show. That's been documented and people have talked about it. But as the show moved on, and a lot of shows change over time, but as this show moved on, there were a couple things going on. First of all, there was a rift between Erik Estrada and Larry Wilcox. I don't know the exact details of it. I just know they didn't get along for a while. And in those season 4 episodes where it slows down and your viewing slowed down, you could see that. Ponch makes just a couple little cameo appearances in most episodes. And sometimes Jon is talking to him on the phone and you never see Ponch. It's just Jon on the phone and there's nobody at the other end.
Yeah, and I feel like they would probably go back to Ponch and see him.
Yeah, you never even saw him. So I think, I know there was contract disputes and different things, but I know those guys weren't getting along. And they actually make it through another season. They go to season 5 and Jon is still there, but then in season 6, Jon leaves. And they bring Tom Riley in, and he's kind of a clone of John Baker, his character, in some ways.
And I feel like when people do that, when they make somebody go in the part that some other actor went into and they make it like exactly the same or very, very similar, I feel like that never works. And I feel like maybe they should have stuck with a character that we knew kind of, but we didn't know a lot about, like Grossi or something like that. I think he's funny, and I feel you said even like Ponch has gotten to be kind of like a Jon.
Yeah, Ponch, I liked him in those early episodes too because he's goofy and he's a little inept. He makes brash choices and gets himself into trouble, and that creates a lot of comedy. But he couldn't do that for 5 or 6 years. No. So he grew over time. He became a good cop, and he was more in the mold of what Jon was when the show started by the time we get to seasons 4, 5, and 6.
And I feel like Grossi is still kind of funny. So maybe he could kind of play the part of what Ponch was, but in a different way.
Right, they'd have a different dynamic. I think that's true. I mean, in MASH, we saw that when Radar left, they moved Klinger up. And Klinger was very different than Radar. And that's what always worked with MASH. When Frank Burns left, he was inept and goofy and a poor surgeon, but he was a foil in the show. When they brought in the new foil, Charles Winchester, he was extremely gifted surgeon and very intelligent. And that points out what you're saying. You got to bring in somebody different. You can't bring in a clone of who you had to play a similar character. It doesn't. It
never really works
because they'll always be compared to the guy before them or the whoever played the character. The character before them will always overshadow it because you're not going to copy it. You shouldn't try.
And you're so used to the character before.
Exactly. So I would say the first 2 seasons for me are really, really fun and awesome. I love them. Season 3 I still liked. Season 4 is where things start to turn a little bit. And they get really intense too. I mean, there's a lot of darker episodes. They're not fun. They're a little more graphic even in nature. They show more than they would have ever shown in the first few seasons. It becomes a much heavier piece.
It wasn't really the CHiPs that you knew before.
Right. And with the heavier storylines, it just didn't seem to go. It just didn't seem to work. The formula was gone at that point. I still like the show. I still have fond memories of the show. I would still watch the episodes. I just think the first few seasons are stronger. And that's sort of similar for me with MacGyver. While I like all 7 seasons of MacGyver, and I do, the first few seasons are my favorite because he was like an international spy. He was, part James Bond and part Indiana Jones. And he was traveling around the world doing things. By the end of the show, he's more like a social worker. It's all domestic, and he's maybe dealing with a boys club going under or something like that. It's a very different show by the end than it is at the beginning. But the character,
right. And with MacGyver, I think that MacGyver is such a good character, or for me, I really, really liked him. So to me, it didn't really matter that he changed a ton. But for some reason, CHiPs kind of did. Not a ton, it didn't change a lot, but it's still...
He definitely played with the formula as it moved on, and, it's different. It's like Buck Rogers season 2 versus season 1. Season 1's a very different show than season 2. So I think the first 3 seasons of this are far different than the last 3 seasons, especially the very last season. But you can't blame it all on Tom Riley and what happened in season 6, because you could already see the cracks developing in seasons 4 and 5 because the actors weren't getting along. And when your leads don't get along, it translates to the screen. It really does in some ways. But they seem to be having a lot of fun in those first 3 seasons, and that's what I remember most.
And that's, I think, what I'm always going to remember. I'm going to try to stay focused on those seasons and keep on watching those ones once in a while instead of looking at the other 3.
Right. And you mentioned Sergeant Getrer, and Robert Pine is a great actor and underrated, but he always was a great character actor. And he is very strong in those later seasons. His part is bumped up a little bit because of, Erik Estrada not being there as much, and then eventually Larry Wilcox leaving. And he does a great job. It's just
I think he's kind of what keeps things together some of the time.
I agree with that. So in any case, knowing all this and thinking about all 6 seasons, what do you feel about this show?
I think that it's probably in between a see it and a skip it, just because the last 3 seasons aren't the best. But I'd say season 1, 2, and 3 you should definitely see.
I would agree with that. I'd say those first 3 seasons are definitely a see it. They're a lot of fun. It's nostalgia, and it shows you that West Coast way of life in the late 70s, early 80s, which is pretty cool. And the later seasons, it's not that they're so bad. It's just a very different show. And I think that I miss the formula and the partnership and the dynamic that was going on between Jon and Ponch in those first 3 seasons in those later seasons. That's my problem with those. Not that they're horrible, just that I miss what I fell in love with about the show in the first place.
Yeah.
All right.